It's an unforgettable opening to a film. The title shows and the camera sweeps across the beige expanse of the Trans-Pecos in western Texas. It's pure western. The desert, the lonely wanderer, the eagle. The red of the cap, the white of the clouds, and the blue of the sky. Underscoring this is the now iconic main-themed Paris, Texas, composed and performed by Ry Cooder. By the time Paris, Texas was being produced in the early 1980s, Cooder was recognised as one of the world's best guitarists in general, and probably the era's best slide guitarist overall. He'd worked with a laundry list of the world's highest profile musicians like Eric Clapton, Captain Beefheart, Neil Young, the Monkees, Randy Newman, the Rolling Stones, the Doobie Brothers, and many more, and already had a couple of film scores under his belt. Ry Cooder and Wim Wenders, the director of Paris, Texas, met for the first time to talk about Wenders' 1982 film Hammett, wanting a kind of bluesy soundtrack. The studio, apprehensive about hiring someone known best as a guitarist, not a composer, rejected Wenders' suggestion and went with the safer choice of John Barry. Wenders wasn't going to let that happen again, and so just 2 years later he enlisted Cooder to make the soundtrack to his new film, Paris, Texas. But the story of Paris, Texas's music begins over half a century earlier, in December 1927, when Texan bluesman Blind Willie Johnson walked into a makeshift recording studio in Dallas in the first of just 5 sessions he would ever have. The 5th song recorded that day was Dark Was the Night, Cold Was the Ground, which has become not only Johnson's most well-known song, but one of the most iconic tunes of all early recorded blues. It even made an appearance in Scorsese's Killers of the Flower Moon last year. For many people who know it, it will be the only song sung by Blind Willie Johnson that they know, so it's difficult to see how much it stands out even within his own oeuvre. Johnson wasn't normally in the studio recording. He was normally just on street corners, a jingling cup tied to the end of his guitar to collect any scraps of money he could. In this setting, a quiet, intimate hum simply just doesn't carry. Most of his songs are fast, loud, and feature a powerful, deep, gravelly voice. To hear Johnson play such a simple, aimless piece with his voice reduced to a reedy hum, not even letting out any lyrics, is particularly affecting when knowing the vigour with which he normally delivered a performance. Listen to his gruff, guttural calls on John the Revelator. Who's that riding? John the Revelator. Compare this with the thin hum on Dark Was the Night. Ry Cooder called the song the most soulful, transcendent piece in all American music, and he included a recording of it on his eponymous debut record in 1970. Wenders knew this, and so when it came to creating the score for Paris, Texas, Wenders played Cooder the piece as inspiration, with nearly the whole score being very clearly based off the Johnson tune. The similarities between the main theme of Paris, Texas and Dark Was the Night are striking, both musically and contextually. Though a substantial part of the middle section is set in California, Paris, Texas is bookended in the Lone Star State, and Johnson was a Texan through and through. I haven't gone through his entire life story for this video, so maybe some blues expert in the comments can let me know, but I don't think he actually ever left Texas in his life. It's Texan music through and through. The musical similarities are equally striking. Both are dominated by the guitar, but not quite solo guitar pieces. Johnson's humming, as well as the amount of noise in the nearly 100-year-old recording, makes it feel like one man and his guitar lost in the world. The strange, almost undefinable background noise that's heard in Paris, Texas's theme makes it feel like one guitar lost in the desert. I've tried extremely hard to find out exactly what that background sound is. I've emailed people who worked on it, tried to find interviews, but I can't conclusively say. The prevailing opinion is that it's some kind of combination of electric piano, plastic hoses swinging in the desert, a jumbush, a Turkish string instrument, which I hope I'm saying reasonably correctly, and some kind of double bass. There's a lot out there, and I can't get much closer, which is frustrating, but I have now been looking for weeks. Both Dark Was the Night and Paris, Texas's theme are haunting slide pieces in D, and both use the slide to great effect to create microtones. I hate the word microtonal. I think there's a laundry list of problems with the discourse around it, and the incredibly Eurocentric and often totally pointless way that microtonality is conceived, but there's a whole separate video in that. For all intents and purposes, both have these microtonal blues inflections that really stand out. You can see it just before Cooder falls to the tonic in Paris, Texas, sliding up from the minor third of F, but never quite reaching that major third of F sharp. The rhythm is fairly loose too. In Dark Was the Night and Paris, Texas, the rhythm is purposely irregular, it's free. Musicologist William T. Dargan, who specialises in old black hymns, writes of Dark Was the Night that, although the rhythm is freely measured, there is a sense of pulse connected more to the flow of the words as breath phrases than to any sense of metrical regularity. Obviously this is different from Paris, Texas because there's no actual singing in the theme, but it clearly draws its rhythmic style from this. As I mentioned at the start, the film opens with this main theme and Travis wandering around in the desert in something that looks straight out of a classic western. Musicologist Aaron Bauer, who has written about Paris, Texas' music as a kind of new western, writes, "With the exception of Canthon Mixa, Cooder's score is essentially monothematic, using stark variations on the single guitar motif derived from Johnson's blues tune to represent the unchanging, frontier-like landscape and the main character's inability to move beyond his familial devastation. When imagining Paris, Texas, I imagine most, including myself, think of the big open desert, Harry Dean Stanton in his bedraggled suit and red cap, and that music. But this western setting is really a small proportion of the overall film. The setting moves to become urban surprisingly quickly, and with few exceptions stays an urban film. The music keeps that western feel even when the setting changes through its extremely consistent tone. You can see this, for example, in this incredible shot of the road and a really striking sunset as we get a little more into modern civilization. The melodic material is a little different to before. It takes on a darker tone with the vibrato more extreme, the steel of the guitar strings creaking under the slide being more prominent, and the register being lower. But it's still in the same area, but it's not the same. Cooder is making a lot of and creating a fairly wide emotional breadth from what is essentially a really small amount of melodic material. Apart from the main theme, the other most important piece of music in the film is Canthon Mixa, which is heard partially a couple of times in the first 50 minutes of the film, but features in a prominent moment in the Super 8 scene, one of the film's most famous moments. It's quite different from all the blues music heard in the rest of the film. Whilst that feels almost directionless, and I don't mean that as a criticism, directionless in the sense of kind of wandering, Canthon Mixa, when it's first heard at the diner scene, is much more direct. It was written in 1912 by Oaxacan composer Jose Lopez Alaves, which Bauer summarises as describing his homesickness for Oaxaca once he was living in Mexico City. The title translates to Mixtec song, referring to an indigenous group from an area roughly corresponding to modern-day Oaxaca. The song, which on the soundtrack album is sung by lead actor Harry Dean Stanton himself, exists in a slightly strange space. It's non-diegetic music in the film, as in it's not heard in the universe of the film, but the recording on the soundtrack is performed by the lead actor. It's performed by the lead actor, but again, it's not like Wenders makes this obvious unless you actually check who was singing it. And is it sung by Harry Dean Stanton, or is it sung by Travis? It's a little like stepping into Travis's memory, and the lyrics, when looking at what they're actually saying in English, clearly reflect Travis as the lonely wanderer, far from home. How far I am from the land where I was born. Immense nostalgia invades my thoughts, and seeing myself so lonely and sad like a leaf in the wind, I want to cry, I want to die from this feeling. O land of sun, I yearn to see you. Now that I live far away, without light, without love, and seeing myself so lonely and sad like a leaf in the wind, I want to cry, I want to die from this feeling. For Alaves, this home is physical, Oaxaca. For Travis, this home is of his former emotional state and his former life. Bauer, in talking about Paris, Texas as this new western, points out how non-white the origins of this soundtrack are. Sure, Cooder is, but the two main strands of music in the film are from ethnic minorities in America, black and Mexican. She writes that this is a theme of Ry Cooder's work in general, that it has fundamentally comprised a series of projects related to working class, marginalised and largely forgotten musicians, with this same sense of social commentary permeating the music of Paris, Texas. I'm not sure how much I agree with this. Certainly Cooder does this, but I think it's more an appeal to emotion and commentary on a more abstract sense of belonging that the music conveys, rather than necessarily the specifics that Bauer says. Other broadly similar moments of the score are heard all the time throughout the film, but there's one particular musical moment I wanted to touch on. It only comes briefly, and it only comes in the background, about an hour and a half into the film, as Travis walks into the Peep Show club that Jane works in. Lots of the film has been colourful, red and urban. It's not exactly new by this point, but there is a marked change in this scene. It's far more underground and seedy, but also by far the most modern music heard. Houston post-punk outfit My Dolls play their 1983 song A World of Her Own.
And when she was good, she did what she was told.
It's the most musically unique moment in the whole film, for it swaps out the acoustic guitar, which has thus far dominated the musical landscape, with the modern and much less timeless sound of the electric guitar. The film came out in 1984 and the song came out in 1983. This is pretty much as new as music got. It makes the moment Travis steps into the club a moment where he is truly out of place. It disconnects him, and by virtue of that, us, even further from the world he steps into. It's also this music that we hear the first time Jane is shown, and if you've seen Paris, Texas, you hardly need me to explain why the lyrics are pertinent to that. Once there was a boy who loved the little girl he wanted in her world. Though he loved her and she loved him, he couldn't get in. At the heart-wrenching end of the film, as Travis drives away from Houston, leaving Hunter and Jane behind, we finally hear a piece of music that, in some way, has been dying to be heard all throughout the film. Finally, we hear Cooder's guitar playing Dark Was the Night, Cold Was the Ground, after dancing around its ideas and its influence for 2.5 hours. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, then please do leave a like or subscribe, and best of all, leave a comment. I do best to reply to all my comments. If you like this video, you can also check out some of my other videos about films and TV. There'll be a playlist linked in the description, along with the script and the sources, and hopefully I'll see you next time.